Welcome to the YouTube channel of Michael J. Swanson. Michael is the author of How David Beats Goliath and is the CEO of Advocate Capital. And now, here's Michael.
Hi, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Mike Swanson. This webinar is brought to you by Advocate Capital Incorporated. I am the CEO of Advocate and one of the owners of Advocate. And our team provides the AdvoTrack case expense funding service for plaintiff lawyers around the country. We help them get even better results for their clients. I'm also the author of How David Beats Goliath. This is the only book ever published to help plaintiff lawyers understand the financial markets and business topics. And in both of my roles, we're always looking for ways to provide helpful content for plaintiff lawyers, whether they're our clients or not, because we know that plaintiff lawyers are the keys to the courtroom for our citizens around the country. And so if you're a plaintiff lawyer, thank you for what you do in your community. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I think is very important. It's about the most important resources you have in your law firm. It's about the human resources and how to better manage and motivate your staff. And to help us do that today, I have asked Cheryl Pope to join us. Cheryl, are you with us yet? She should be joining.
I'm here.
There she is. Hi, Cheryl.
How are you?
Doing great. How's it going down there in Dallas? I heard you had a ton of rain last week.
We had a ton of rain, but I could not be more excited that it's only about 70 degrees today. So that's what we call winter weather and coat weather here in Texas.
So everybody's breaking out their boots and their coats and their gloves, I suppose?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
We get fall fever instead of spring fever because it's actually cool enough to go outside now. So.
Oh, good for you. It's kind of cool. It's been dreary all week, so I'm looking forward to a sunny weekend. So anyway, this is me, as I said. This is Cheryl, and Cheryl is an organizational effectiveness coach, and she helps businesses, including law firms around the country, get better results inside their organization. And Cheryl, we're so glad you could join us today. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you share with us some of the experience that you had in helping organizations with their staffing management.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, just a little bit of background about myself. I spent 25 plus years in corporate America, places you've heard of like American Airlines and Brinker International, which is a restaurant company with Chili's and Maggiano's. And then a place you probably haven't heard of, but know a lot of the companies in terms of a private equity firm that owns different things like Winn-Dixie grocery stores, Del Frisco's, and then some financial services. And so as the background with all my experience with that, I've also been married to a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years. And so I see the challenges that lawyers are faced with regards to running their practice. Because you go to law school, you learn really cool things about how to practice law. Right. Very seldom do you spend a lot of time getting good insight on how to run your practice as a business. And yes. I've not yet found a firm that is successful without its people. So it's a place that, is really near and dear to my heart, is helping law firms and lawyers, just maximize the best resource they have, which is their people.
Yeah, absolutely. I've observed the same thing over the years. We have about 480 law firm clients. As I read their resumes when they first come in as a client, the vast majority of them have an undergrad in history or political science or something like that, English, and so they're not learning the business topics in undergrad. And then, like you said, they go to law school. They don't teach you business in law school. You're just kind of thrust into being a business owner and a business manager. So I agree. So I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'll just get going. I always start these discussions off with this cartoon because I think it really just makes me laugh. It's like I'm not lacking leadership skills. Everyone else is lacking followership skills. And I hear that all the time, regardless of whether it's a client in corporate America or a law firm, because the fact of the matter is, as people, we're fun to be around, but we're also really hard to deal with and hard to motivate and manage from time to time. But I would say from a law firm standpoint, and whether you're the managing partner of your firm or whether you're just running a practice area, especially with plaintiff firms, I don't see people spend enough time really thinking through what they need to do relative to their people, which is unfortunate because if you think about most of your business is on a contingency basis.
Right.
And you're really risking a lot of your potential fee based on how your people feel about you and your firm and the work they do.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot different than maybe on the defense end where you're billing hours, et cetera. So I just, I think about lawyers, you spend so much time when you have a new case developing your case strategy. And if you could just spend some of that time and also think about your people strategy, I think it would serve you very well. And I've kind of boiled it down to 4 key points as far as having a successful team. And it's having a plan, matching the people to your plan and your culture, working with your people, and that's a two-way street. It's not just them working for you.
Right.
But then also not being afraid to break up. And so I'll go into a little bit more detail on each and every one of those. And Mike, I'm sure you'll have some great points or some questions along the way. So
yeah, so breaking up, that's a very nice way of saying firing people, right?
Well, and it is, but and I'll get to it later on, but if you don't break up when you need to, it can cause more issues going forward. So,
right.
Well, let me just jump on in unless you have any questions up front, Mike. You good?
No, it's going great.
Good. So, it's great to have 4 key points. What does this actually mean, having a plan? First and foremost, I really encourage every firm to have a mission statement. And a mission statement is just a simple, what are you doing and why are you doing it? In my experience, I have found that firms or organizations in general that do have mission statements, sometimes they can tend to be really wordy, and as these cartoons illustrate, they don't really tell me anything, or they just say, hey, I want to do more. Okay, well, what does that mean too? And while you may have a good sense in your own mind about what you're doing and why you're doing it, if you can't articulate that to the people on your staff, how are they going to be able to articulate it to your clients, to referring lawyers, to anybody else who might care about what you're doing? So, just simply put, a mission statement just helps align people to a clear primary purpose. I worked with a firm a couple of years ago, and it was a small firm, and it's actually kind of a funny story that illustrates this point. 2 partners, small firm, staff of, I think they had 4 or 5 people, and they were combining their practices to form a new firm. And one of the attorneys had focused a lot on criminal, another had focused always on personal injury. And so these 2 got along better than most people that I've ever seen get along from a partnership standpoint. Great communication, great dialogue, aligned on so many things. Then when we did a strategic planning session, one of the first questions I asked is, okay, we've got to put a final point on what do you do and what's going to be the balance between criminal and personal injury.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, the criminal person said, oh, well, I think it's going to be about 50%. I'm going to reduce down what I'm doing, but it's going to be about 50%. And the personal injury guy was like, no, I thought we were eliminating criminal, maybe, take 5%. But, and when the 2 of them, who were such great communicators about it, were not on the same page about the amount of cases they were going to take, the type of cases, amount of cases, et cetera, it just creates confusion. And so if the 2 of them weren't on the same page, that just kind of magnifies on down to their staff because what do we prioritize? Do we, refer these cases out? What do we do? So that whole notion of really getting on the same page about what you do, why you do it, and for whom is so critical because, if people are calling up and they don't know what you do and your intake person answers the question wrong, you could lose a huge case too. So first step is be clear in what you do and write it down and be able to make it simple. So
I totally agree. And I think what's really great is if you're a plaintiff lawyer watching this, you have a great mission right there in front of you. I mean, to help people get access to the courts to solve their problems, regardless what type of cases you take, is so inspiring. In fact, our mission at Advocate is to help an ever-increasing number of plaintiff lawyers get even better results for their clients. And it's such an easy why that we can rally the troops around, if you will, because what we do is we share stories about cases our clients have taken on and won for their plaintiffs. We share those every couple of weeks with the entire company. It's really motivating to know that our clients are out there really helping people all day long. So I think taking the time to write that down though is really important as well, so the staff understands it, because they might not really get it. So great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So once you figure out and get alignment on what you're doing and why you're doing it, where are you going? I think back on when MLK stood out there in Washington. He stood up there and he's like, I have a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And he painted a picture of where he wanted the world to go.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't stand up there and say, I got a plan. That's not really all that inspiring. People want to be part of something, and especially if you have followed any of the stuff or worked with, people who are perhaps a little bit younger than myself, the new younger generations coming out. People more and more want to be part of something.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know where they're going and what that means. And that there's been studies, and I've got it kind of represented here, that organizational vision is meaningful for people and it increases employees' engagement. And so when I talk about engagement, what I mean is people show up to work for two reasons. One is the rational reason, like I like having a house, I need to pay my mortgage, electricity is good, food is useful. But the emotional piece, that's when you get into that true motivating your people and what gets them to want to go the extra step, go the extra mile, and treat the business like their business. More importantly, treat your business as if it's their own. So by giving them some insight on where you're going, helpful as well. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, we want to be the largest law firm in the Southeast. It could be, hey, we want to be the go-to place for people in Dallas, Texas, for clients and employees alike, because you want to have it resonate with your people. So
great, excellent.
So you got, what do you do? Why do you do it? Where are you going? Then the third piece of that is really, how are you going to do it? Culture is something that I don't think a lot of organizations are very thoughtful about or intentional about. And that's really kind of a missed opportunity, because you have a culture, whether you want it or not. And the question really is it the culture that you want? So if you can be mindful and intentional and thoughtful about what you want your workplace to look like, you're going to be a lot more likely to have that come to fruition than if you don't define it. And so core values are something that can help you with that. And that's just simply sitting down as an organization, again, putting some pen to paper and thinking about, okay, what 5-6 things really are key here? Is teamwork really important? Is it quality service? Is it speed and productivity? Because you've got a variety of different types of firms out there. So if you are maybe one that's more volume based, and you have somebody who is so relationship oriented, they may not be a good fit if you don't describe that your values are very productivity based and that it's about just kind of moving things through the process. Because if they want to sit and really build a relationship with a client and spend 3 hours on a phone talking to somebody, that could be a bit of a rub for them. So when I talk about values, those are really the things, the beliefs, the principles for the organization that guide how you guys work with each other internally with the firm, but also externally with clients, with vendors, with opposing counsel, et cetera. And I think another key point, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Can I make a point on the core values thing? So one of the things I love about being a business that's growing is that for 18 years now, we've been growing every year. And so you have to get better all the time. I really like that. I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie. And something we learned from a group called AJ Gallagher a few years ago when we hired them to help us build a compensation program, they talked about the same thing, the core values. And so we actually sat down as a management team and we defined our core values. And they are professionalism, integrity, continuous improvement, teamwork, and service. So we actually laid those out. We said, what does that mean for each of those? There's a plaque on everyone's desk that has those core values. And then twice a year, every employee gets evaluated by the management team on how well they're demonstrating those 5 core values. And it's been terrific to bring it all together rather than just put it on a piece of paper and put it in a drawer somewhere. It's out front. So if you're going to do that, I recommend you really get everybody involved and talk about it at least once or twice a year about those values and how are we doing on them. So I couldn't agree more. It's so important to do that.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, because getting the values on paper, they will help you in how you recruit people, how you motivate people, have those conversations, feedback discussions, performance reviews, etc. And what's the most critical piece of it is that getting alignment on the words and the definitions, because let's use an example of trust. That's a value that I think a lot of people would say would be important. But
Right.
what trust means to me might be a little different than what it means for you. And it probably is different than what it means for 5 other people out there. So what you have to do is really articulate, what does trust mean at your firm, and define it. And then you can use that. I get a lot of questions, especially from smaller firms. Hey, don't we need an employee handbook? Don't we need to have all these rules so people know what to do? I am much more of the philosophy that, an employee handbook is important, and there are some compliance related issues for it.
Sure.
But if you have some well thought out values that are consistent with your mission and vision, that's pretty much 90% of your true north. And if people have questions about, gosh, we've never had this situation come up, how should we handle it? Go back to your mission, go back to your vision, and go back to your values. And that'll help you in that decision-making process, much more so than saying, this page number 28 in the employee handbook says that you cannot do that. It just gives you some of those bumpers for how do you want the organization to behave.
Yeah, and we've found that having the core values separate from the core the role-related competencies of what they do every day. So whatever their role is, the things they need to get done all day, having those separate is really helpful, because you can have people who are very productive, but they're jerks. We don't have any here, but I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, somebody can they can say, well, I got my job done today. Well, yeah, but you weren't a team player, or you didn't have a good positive attitude and things like that. So I think having that defined and separate has been helpful for us. And there are people who come in, they're struggling at first because they're new, they're learning things, but they're really demonstrating the core values, so we can give them immediate, positive feedback. You're on the right track here. We'll teach you what you need to know. So good points.
Yeah. So, well, and my guess is there may be some people out there who are thinking, wow, this stuff makes sense, but oh my gosh, we've never done this. And gosh, our firm's been around 15 years. Gosh, we really missed the ball on this one.
Well, yeah, we
It's
didn't do it
never
for
too
the
late.
15 years. Yeah, we did it maybe 3 years ago. So
Yeah. I have a client, he's had a firm for 30 years, and they just went through this exercise a couple years ago. And so to that point, I'm a big advocate for, I guess no pun intended with Advocate Capital. I'm a big
thank you for the plug.
For giving people practical tips that you can take away. This is just one exercise that you can kind of do on the back of a sheet of paper as you think about your firm initially. It's called a SWOT analysis. It's really just making a list of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what opportunities do you have, and what threats are out there for you. It's a good way to help you look internally as well as externally to your firm as well as the world around you. I would encourage you to do that, but then I would encourage you to talk to people within your firm and have them do it, because that's where you really see potential blind spots, is comparing the strengths and weaknesses that are perceived by you versus the others in your firm. And so while I've spent, 10 minutes talking about mission, vision, values, et cetera, I will say, and I think, Mike, you reiterated this nicely, that this is not something that if you're going to do for your firm, you should just allocate an hour at a weekly staff meeting for. It is important. It is, it's setting the strategy and direction for your firm. So it should be something that's, you take the time, you take the energy, and you really dedicate your just whole self to doing it. And it could take a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, but I also think that it's important for firms to go back and just review it every every year, every 2 years, because things change. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Are we ready for number 2?
we are. Match your plan to your culture, or your people to your plan and culture rather. And so it's easy to sit there and talk about having this plan. So once you have your amazing plan put together, how do you match your people to it?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you need to think about what your ideal employee looks like. Just like I'm sure many of us in high school thought about what our ideal husband or wife might look like. I love my husband dearly, but he has some things that maybe aren't as ideal, just as I have some that aren't as ideal as well. So it's figure out what your ideal employee is, but be realistic about what you're really going to be able to get. But I would also say you've got to talk about what your ideal employee looks like or feels like or sounds like, all those different things before you need to hire somebody. Because we get busy, we get anxious to fill that vacancy, and it gets an exercise of, oh, well, I mean, she seems smart, so I think I'll just hire her. And that's where things go a little south. So,
absolutely.
and so I think there's a couple of things that come to my mind when I think about finding the right people. I love this slide so much.
Yeah,
I don't know why. It just is, if you know what your organizational values are like, you've got to be thoughtful in how you match the people to it. Because if you're creating a culture that's more like the symphony, you really don't want to have Ozzy Osbourne show up. Not
maybe
productive. Maybe a guest appearance, right. But just quickly, some of the key ways I think to help people through that. I'm personally a big fan of using a recruiter. I know that some people are like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. And yeah, it is money. But let me talk on the one hand about using recruiters. Recruiters can help you when you have a vacancy because they typically have a list of clients at the ready. They can do a lot of the screening for you. They can ask questions you probably aren't comfortable asking, and they can handle a lot of the negotiations and legwork for you. So the amount of time that you can save personally by actually working on cases and have the recruiter do could be worth the money. Most of them charge between 15 to 20% of the employee's first year salary. And most of the ones that I've met give you a 90-day guarantee, if you will. So if something doesn't work out, if something doesn't work out during those first 90 days, then, they don't necessarily give you the money back, but they'll go back to the well and help you find another person.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. We've not used recruiters. We've done it ourselves, but I think especially when we were smaller, and we have 45 employees now, but when we have 4 or 5 employees, it is time consuming to try to fill those slots yourself. It's a good point.
Yeah, and especially when you think about, you are contingency fee based, but if you took a look at the amount of hours it takes to do it in-house, so let me now talk about tips for if you choose to do it in-house, which is totally fine as well. Make sure you have a clear job description. Explain what the job is, what's expected, what you're looking for, but also things like who does the person report to? Generally speaking, how many hours a week are they going to work? If you're a small practice and maybe the attorneys travel a lot and maybe the intake person is going to be the only person in the office for a couple days a week, make that clear up front. There's nothing worse than interviewing for a job that you think you're getting and then coming in and thinking, wow, this is not at all what I signed up for. So be thoughtful about the job description. Once you post it a couple different places. There's great resources out there with law schools, universities that offer paralegal certificates, those types of things. But use your job posting strategically. Put something in there that says, hey, if you're going to apply for this job, I need you to submit a cover letter or email that identifies the top 3 reasons why you want to work here. And it's amazing how many people you can weed out of that, because if somebody can't even follow the directions to apply for the job at your firm correctly, what makes you think they're actually going to do what you need them to do when they actually get there? So there are some things you can do strategically up front with the job posting. I'm also a big fan of phone screens. So whether it's you or somebody else on your team, do a quick phone screen, 10, 15 minutes with the person, especially if there's somebody who's going to be very engaged and involved with talking to clients. Don't you want to feel and experience what it's like to talk to them on the phone?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, some roles here at Advocate are 100% telephone job roles that we have. And we don't even do an in-person interview with them until the very end. Like, we do all of our interviewing over the telephone because that's how they're going to be working, right? And we bring them in at the last minute, kind of to see that we're real and to meet us. But that's really true. I've had folks who interview just great on the telephone. And then they show up and I'm like, is this the right person I called in? Because they're totally different. So that's a good point. If they're going to be on the telephone, that's the best way to judge them, because face to face, they might be very shy and they might be more comfortable on the phone. Yeah. And the job description thing is so important too. We finally got a few years ago to where now our job ad reads exactly like our job description, and the review form, their annual review, is basically the job description. So we got those because they were kind of not matching, and the ad said one thing, the job description was a little different, and when it came review time, they didn't match up. So it took a long time to get those synced, but we noticed a difference. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's kind of, like now that I guess everybody lives in this world of online dating, I've heard stories from friends. So they'll see somebody who looks like, George Clooney on the, on the website. And then when they actually go meet him at the date, they're like, oh, not George Clooney.
Yeah.
So same thing goes. That's why I encourage you to do phone screens, et cetera. And then also with the interview, take the time to do the interview. Think about what questions you want to ask beforehand, but more importantly, what answers you're looking for. This should be an exercise in, experience-based interviewing. And so instead of saying, well, do you have experience doing X, Y, Z? Well, any smart interviewee is going to be like, well, yes, of course I do.
Right.
Ask them. Instead, tell me about a time where you worked on this type of case and what the outcome was. And you'll be able to, pick apart the professionals versus the actors, if you will, pretty easily going through that. So, and then once you do figure it out and pick the right person, I realize that money is so important for firms, especially small firms. But if you get to the point where somebody is, kind of over a couple $1,000s, ask yourself, is it worth it? If they're truly the right candidate, is it better to hire that person or not? Because that whole notion of fit, performance, and retention is critical. And so so you'll see I've got the slide here. You want to have somebody who fits with your culture, who can do the job, but you want somebody who's going to stay, because you do spend a lot of time in your hiring process. So make sure that you're finding somebody who will stay. If you're set at, hey, this job's got to be $15 an hour, and somebody comes in and says, well, I'm really looking for $17 an hour, but I'll take this for 15. I can make it work. You got to really ask yourself, that really going to happen, or are they going to make it work until they can find the $17 an hour position?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then last point, just to bring it back to what you talked about, is the performance reviews. When you do make that offer, give them a written offer and have them sign the job description, and make sure that they are clear on this is what they're signing up for. Because, it's just helpful if you have any disconnects along the way. So
beautiful. Great.
Yeah. Okay. Work with your people. So you've got your plan. You've hired the right people. They're starting on Monday. This is so sad to me, the place where I see most people get a little bit off track. It's great. I've done all this hard work. I've got them starting Monday, but they don't really think much past Monday. I think plan a new person's arrival before they get there. Don't panic at 8:30 Sunday night thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get there early so I can make sure that they have a place to sit. I think there's two things to do when somebody new comes on board. First is orientation. That's your day one stuff. Here's the bathroom. Here's the coffee pot. Here's, generally speaking, when we go to lunch. And here's an introduction to everybody. Onboarding is a little bit more strategic and much more intentional. And it's about setting key milestones for people along the way. During the first 30 days, what do you want them to do? Maybe it's just as simple as sit with the intake coordinator for 2 days and listen to things, go with an attorney to a deposition, or, just maybe tagging along to things. But then over the 60, 90 days, 6 months, et cetera, you get more strategic. And that becomes to be also the performance strategy and performance feedback process that you begin to use. Because if you can get yourself used to calendaring some things, having some conversations, and thinking about what you really want the person to do and making sure they're on the same page, understanding what they need to do, makes it so much easier on both of you.
Yeah,
so just really plan out what your onboarding is going to look like before they get there. So
makes sense.
This get to know your people thing, it sounds so intuitive, but I'm not talking about like you don't have to share every personal detail about yourself, anything like that. But behavioral science shows us that 75% of the population is significantly different than ourselves. How we think, how we communicate, how we react to stress, etc. And so if you can understand, first of all, most importantly, how you react to these things, and get some self-awareness around that, then as you get to know your team, you can be pretty powerful in the relationships. There's all sorts of different team building tools with assessments like DISC or emotional intelligence to help you understand how people's styles are different. And I've worked with firms to do this, and it's been helpful for them, not just how they work with each other within the firm, but how do they talk to clients? Somebody might be very results oriented and they just want to go, go, go. But if they're an intake coordinator or even let's just say an attorney, and they get, grandma she's been hurt and she just wants somebody to really listen and really hear her, and needs to have, spend an hour with her listening to her. If that person who's so results focused doesn't recognize that and has a true blind spot about it, he could completely turn off, the client. And so I really encourage people to utilize these types of tools. You can do a quick team building session. You can do it in person. You can do it online. It's fun for the people who are involved, but more importantly, it helps you learn how to navigate the people you deal with differently. Because let's face it, you wouldn't talk to opposing counsel the same way, or you probably shouldn't talk to your opposing counsel the same way you give directions to your paralegal, right?
Hopefully not. Unfortunately, I think a lot of lawyers do. They have one mode, which is just go,
Right. So, yeah.
The assessments are great. We've been using something called the predictive index test for gosh, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years. That's just like the DISC test and things like that. And they really are helpful, because an interview doesn't really tell you much about what motivates them, like you say, how they respond to stress, what kind of type of management is the best to provide for them, what kind of support, and those things can be a shortcut to help you understand, how people like to be treated, because everyone's different.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah. And then I think the next thing is just always thinking in terms of the emotional bank account when it comes to your people. Because while I know we're focusing or wanting to focus on motivating others, at the end of the day, nobody can motivate me other than myself. Now, what people can do is create an environment in which I'm self-motivated. And so this is where I think the emotional bank account comes into play. And just like our personal bank accounts or your operating accounts or whatever, every person on the planet, no matter how sensitive or how tough they are, they have an emotional bank account. And with every interaction we have with somebody, we're either making a deposit or making a withdrawal.
I like that. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, based on, what we say, how we say it, et cetera. And I get the fact you're in the middle of trial prep, something's going on, the time is ticking down. It's natural to snap at somebody or to, have a reaction that's maybe not as positive as you want it to be. But if you think back and if you built that capital and, built up enough deposits with that person, they'll understand this, this really isn't Mike. This isn't who he is. It's just, the situation. But
Yeah.
if it's something where, the person's not really making any deposits, make it very self-centered in everything they say or do, chances are it's going to be, it's going to create some friction and some issues. So
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just some examples there for you, that embody what would be considered a deposit versus a withdrawal. So
Yeah, very cool.
yeah. So you got your plan, you got the right people, you're talking to them, all is right with the world until it's not. And so there will be times where no matter how much thought and effort you have put into something, and same on the employee side, things just don't work out. And that's okay. It doesn't mean your firm's a bad firm, doesn't mean that person's a bad person. Sometimes things change, conditions change, practices change, personal circumstances change with employees, and you need to just make a decision to break up. I will say when you do have these performance issues, you address them sooner rather than later. Now, if you have been clear in the interview process, have feedback sessions, et cetera, and have set clear expectations from day one, it shouldn't be as big of a surprise if you get to that point. But that being said, when you have concerns, talk to the person in specific terms about their behavior, what impact their behavior is having, and what action you want them to take. And this is what is so hard. We have all broken up with people in our lives, whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, somebody who mows the lawn, somebody, who cuts our hair. We've all had to have those uncomfortable conversations. And part of that is because we don't want the other person to take it personally. That's why if you can break it down to behavior, impact, and action, you can help make it a little bit more objective. The natural tendency is for somebody to say, oh, well, Bob, you really you're just not cutting it. I need you to step it up a little.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Right? Yeah. So be more specific. Yeah. Hey, Bob, I've noticed that whenever I give you, ask you for a run on our current case log, it takes you 2 days to get it done. And the last 3 times you've gotten it done, you've left off, these 3 types of files. So the impact is this: we don't have a good, clear picture into what's going on with our firm. We're missing deadlines, and it's causing us to disappoint our clients. Now, the action I need you to take is I need you to double check the run every time you do it, and I want you to ask for somebody else to give it a second glance too before you bring it to the managing partner. And I need you to do that. I need you to correct this behavior immediately. And so the key word here too is correct it instead of improving it.
Interesting.
Because if he only has 2 mistakes next time, then that's really an improvement. So go Bob. But you really want to correct it instead. So it's about that difficult conversation. You're doing the other person a favor as much as you're doing yourself a favor. That being said, sometimes people just still don't get it, and you do need to break up with them. So when it does become inevitable, be thoughtful about it. Plan your meeting in advance. Think about what you're going to say, where you're going to have the meeting, what time of day you're going to do it, whose eyes are going to be on you, if you will, from the staff standpoint. Know your state and local laws. If you need to, call an employment lawyer, find out what those things are. Some states require you to pay the person their final paycheck before they walk out the door. Others, you only have to do it within a certain amount of time. Others require you to pay vacation. So know that kind of stuff so that it can be a graceful exit. Because regardless of what happens with that person not being an employee anymore, they could be and are always going to be a potential client or a potential referral source. So if you can have that graceful exit with them, that will be all the better.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is important to note is that if you don't break up with the person, it becomes toxic. And everybody around you knows what's happening. All your good employees are watching.
Yep.
And what happens is the people who jump ship first are the ones that can swim. So your good employees will leave if they see, if they see that you're just letting this go on. So, don't be afraid to break up, but then also have a strategy for what are you going to say to the rest of the staff? Because they'll notice that Bob or whoever it's not there. What are you going to say to the staff, to your vendors, to your clients, et cetera?
Clients too.
Yeah. And, depending on the reason for the separation, if it's fairly amicable, now if somebody has stolen, $100,000 from you, that might be a little bit different. But, if it's an amicable breakup, get their input. What do they want the message to be? Have this be a partnership. It doesn't have to be as painful as we try and make it a lot of the time. So
Great points.
Break up with people. So why does this all matter? I'm like the world's biggest fan of emojis right now because they put into into pictures what I don't really know what to say. But why does this all matter? So if you'll go to the next slide, this would not be a good people learning opportunity if I didn't have a seeing eye chart for you. So the gist of this is when your people aren't happy, it creates a toxic firm. It creates static and shrinkage for you, which creates lack of opportunities for them. They get irritated. They waste time. They waste money, which causes you to lose clients and lose time and money. And then you're not as competitive because you're not making as much money and you're unhappy. Rinse and repeat. And the whole cycle just keeps going around and around. And so my, challenge for everybody listening would be really ask yourself, do you want to be a boss or do you want to be a leader? And think about, if you're truly a partner or an owner in your firm, especially, you're a small business owner. And the biggest asset you have and the biggest liability you have are your people. And so how you show up for them every day impacts how they show up for you. So we've probably all seen some iteration of this graphic, whether we're on Facebook or LinkedIn, but the difference between a boss and a leader. Somebody is a leader who will truly tap into that inner motivation. They coach their employees. They're optimistic. They're team oriented. They give credit, and they're all about working for you as much as you work for them. So I would just summarize everything by saying, which do you want to be, a boss or a leader, and which is going to serve your firm the best? So.
Yeah, well said, Cheryl. And in another webinar I do called Managing Your Growing Law Firm for Success, I would encourage folks watching this to do a self-assessment and see, are you ready to be the CEO of essentially a company, right, of a law practice, or do you just want to practice law? Because sometimes folks, they just want to practice law, and if that's the case, that's all right. So maybe you work for someone else, or maybe if you're growing, you can do it. You hire a practice manager to come in and do all those business things to allow you to focus on the law. So sometimes I think lawyers, just people generally, just aren't cut out to do a lot of these business things, and just being self-aware of limitations can be helpful rather than trying to force a square peg into a round hole, which we see, that happens sometimes. Folks don't realize their shortcomings, and so self-awareness is really, really important. Well, that's some great stuff. Let me just open up. I'm going to look at, I have to watch the webinar down here. That's what I'm doing. I'm not checking my email. I'm just going to offer, if there are questions of anybody and attendees, if anybody has them, go ahead and type them in the questions box. Right now, I'll keep an eye for that, see if we have anything pop up. Otherwise, this is Cheryl's contact information. And Cheryl, do you work only with law firms, or do you work with other businesses as well?
No, my law firm is about clientele is about half of my practice base,
okay.
Maybe 40%. But I work with other large organizations like BNSF Railway, On the Border, restaurants, some public relations firms. So I think also helpful too in terms of being able to bring some of the stuff that big firms have done
Yes.
and translating it in, and this is a critical word, non-bureaucratic ways to a small firm. That's why a lot of the folks who have their own firms or smaller firms are there, because they don't want to deal with all the bureaucracy. There are ways that you can take the best practices that have already been established by other entities and make them your own.
Yeah, absolutely. We found that great benefits to hiring professional consultants like yourself to get instant access to decades of experience across various industries about things that apply to our business. There's really no other way to get it. I mean, you can try it yourself, but you don't have enough time in the day to read all the books you need to read and get that actual experience. Well, folks, if you can't see Cheryl's contact information on this slide, what we'll do is we'll put it underneath the video in the text portion on Vimeo and on YouTube, so you'll have that. This is my contact information if you have questions for me. If you're watching this and you'd like a copy of my book, I'd be happy to send you a copy. Just message me or put a comment in the questions. Send me an email. It's available on iTunes. It's available on BarnesandNoble.com. All those kind of good things. You can get it for your Kindle, but I'll send you an actual copy if you want. I'll even put your name on it and sign it for you if you're attending today. And all the profits from my book go to the AAJ Seventh Amendment Fund. So I'm not doing it to make money. Well, Cheryl, it's great to speak with you again. Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to say anything else?
Just thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always great to see you. I know we see each other at AAJ quite a bit, and I do go to most of the AAJ functions as the +1 spouse. So if you want to give me a shout, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. And if not, hopefully I'll meet you at some sort of not you, Mike, because I know you, but anybody else.
Maybe injury board, right? I'm not making it to the IB Summit. Are you and Brian going?
Yes. We've got some good stuff planned for that. So
great. Well, enjoy.
Talking about business planning as well.
I look forward to hearing about it. So I wanted to get there. I couldn't make it. So anyway, thanks so much for being here, Cheryl. To our viewers, thank you for joining us today. If you registered for this, you'll also get an email link, I think tomorrow, Amanda, or Monday. So you'll get a link to the recording of this if you want to share it with your partner or your staff or review it again later. And I know Cheryl, like me, would be happy to answer any questions that you have later if you want to chat or shoot us an email. So thanks for joining us today. And thanks to our team at Advocate Capital for presenting this. And we hope you have a successful rest of your day and move on to get even better results for your clients. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Send your questions or comments to Michael at mike@howdavidbeatsgoliath.com.